Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Rachel Clemens. I'm the CMO here at Mighty Citizen, and I have two guests with me today. We'll do intros in a minute fully, but I have Christina Llewellyn, Executive Director at Association of Technology Leaders in Independent Schools, hereby known as Atlas, and Kelsey Watson, Director of Marketing and Events at Atlas as well. I'm so excited to be joined by you guys today. And today does kick off. It's our first session in a three-part series, Mightier Marketing in 1, 2, 3. And the goal of that series is to help you guys prepare for 2023. It's September. Hopefully we're all starting to turn our attention there and get us ready for this. So we want to provide some new knowledge, some practical tips, useful tools to help you guys further your mission next year. And today's session is the first one, measure and improve your marketing effectiveness in 2023. Before we dive in, I have a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions during the webinar, to make sure they aren't missed, please put them in the Q&A chat box, not the actual official chat box, if that makes sense. There is a Q&A section. Please put them there. We also have closed captioning available, and there's a live transcript option at the bottom of the screen where you can enable it if you need to. And then, as the cover that you're looking at right now says, the presentation slides, a link to the recording, and a few other tools will be sent to each attendee tomorrow. So don't feel pressured to take notes. There's a lot here, and we're going to make sure to share those with you guys. And part of the walkthrough today, or part of the webinar today, is a walkthrough of our self-assessment to measure your marketing effectiveness, the Mighty GPS. So we'll be sharing info on that as well. And I think we're ready to get started. Okay, let's see here. So I shift gears. All right, talked about this already, but specifically today, we're going to talk about what I think of as the Sasquatch, the Loch Ness Monster, the abominable snowman of the marketing world, which is marketing effectiveness. To me, it's like that elusive creature that like you're pretty sure it exists, or like you believe it exists, but you're not quite sure you've ever seen it. So today we'll talk about how we can really uncover our marketing effectiveness and what that looks like. I'm Rachel Clemens, the CMO of Mighty Citizen. If you're not familiar with Mighty Citizen, we're the branding, marketing, and digital agency for mission-driven organizations. So we help our clients increase their revenue, build their awareness, and better their communities, typically through things like branding, messaging, websites, campaigns, analytics, all covered under communications. We did this fun little thing where we shared our strengths and weaknesses. And so I think my strength is creativity, but I am in the midst of some pumpkin chai lattes, y'all. It has gotten a little out of control, and they've only been out for like a week or something. So, Christina, will you please introduce yourself?
Hey, everybody. I am Christina Llewellyn, and I am the Chief Staff Officer, the Executive Director of Atlas. It is a mouthful. We primarily represent CIOs and technology teams that work at K-12 private schools, independent schools. We, however, provide a lot of technology resources to the entire school and also the entire independent school community. So we have our core tech teams, but we also do have some outreach deeper into our independent school industry. I am indeed raising 4 teenage daughters, and while I am not a pumpkin spice latte sugar syrup person, I'm kind of a plain latte kind of person. I will say that I do have 2 daughters who spent the summer working at Starbucks, and one still does, and I get a lot of free beans as part of their benefits. So that's my weakness.
Fantastic. Kelsey?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelsey Watson. I'm the Director of Marketing and Events here at Atlas. And I would say one of my strengths is thinking outside of the box to find solutions or generate new ideas. And I am a sucker for peanut M&Ms. My husband hates peanuts or anything peanut. And I just realized the other day in talking to a friend that I have a gluten allergy, and so he'll buy all the chocolates that I can't eat, like Twix and stuff, and he's like, look, I got you your own bag of chocolates. And I'm like, but you don't like these. I like the ones you're eating, and I can't eat it. Because you just don't want to share. But anyway.
Awesome.
Here today.
I don't like peanuts either. I told my husband, buy all the peanut candy, because then I'm not tempted. So today, by the end of this webinar, you will be able to understand the value of marketing effectiveness, how to measure your own marketing effectiveness, and the steps you can take to further your marketing effectiveness. Marketing effectiveness is a spectrum. So we'll be diving more into that and what that looks like, and how you can go further along the spectrum. I'm going to go ahead and share the URL to the Mighty GPS, which is our self-assessment tool for measuring marketing effectiveness. Maybe hold off on filling it out because it takes about 6 or 7 minutes. But I did want to go ahead and share it so you guys could, if you wanted to kind of follow along and just sort of see what it looks like, you could pop in there real quick and do that. Okay, so we know that effectiveness is hard to measure. I want to take a quick poll and ask you guys, do you know how effective your marketing is overall? By the way, totally anonymous poll. Nobody can see how you're answering, so it is a safe space. And the options are going to be yes, no, and I'm afraid to say. So you will be in good company. Let's see. Here's the poll. I think you guys can see that now. And while that's going, I'm curious, Kelsey, how would you answer this question? Yes, no, or I'm afraid to say?
Afraid to say.
Yeah, I think I would sort of say that too. I feel like we've sort of started to figure out how to measure it, but it is a constant, it's an ongoing task, right?
Definitely.
So we've got some results coming in. I'll share while they're still coming in, I'll just sort of tell you what I'm seeing, but we'll share these in a moment. Most of you are saying no. About 25% of you are saying I'm afraid to say, and about 21% are saying yes. So there you can see it. 23% said yes, 53% said no, and I'm afraid to say. So we're in good company today. Don't worry about that. Just know that we're going to help you, kind of solve that problem perhaps, or work to solve that problem. Now, when we think about marketing effectiveness, there's kind of 2 ways we measure anything, right? It's qualitative and quantitative. To start with the quantitative, a lot of us put a lot of effort in recently, especially to better measure our quantitative data. So, how much, what our metrics look like, how our digital ads did. Those are things we can now measure. But I think a lot of us understand that that's still a challenge. Deloitte did a brand marketing effectiveness study, and they found that marketers struggle with trusting the data that they have, a lack of data available for the metrics they actually want to measure, and knowing what to measure. So here at Mighty Citizen, we use HubSpot, we use Google Analytics, Google Data Studio. We have the metrics at our fingertips, but actually diving in and knowing what's important to look at and what's not among all the data we could be looking at. For us, that's our quantitative challenge. And then on the qualitative side, people are, oh, how well is your marketing working? And you'll give them an answer, but it's really a gut instinct. There's not, qualitatively, you might hear from somebody they liked something, but it's one person, right? So that's also hard to measure. So when we think about understanding why effectiveness matters, I might be preaching to the part a little bit here, but when you know your marketing effectiveness, it allows you to capitalize on what's working. What's working? What can I be doing more of? What's not working, but is easy to do? So that low-hanging fruit, understanding where those opportunities lie. It does save you time and money. You don't have to keep investing in things that aren't actually working, and gives you an area to look at, really putting your skills and your money to work. Showing how you can augment your team when you understand what's working and what isn't. When you have the opportunity to bring someone else onto your team, you can match their skills up with those alignments. So, are they strong in the areas that you're strong in, or maybe they have a strength in an area that's a weakness, and you now have an opportunity to make that less of a weakness. It helps you to understand your return on investment. We are all investing money and hoping we get more than that dollar spent back in return, and understanding marketing effectiveness helps you know if that's actually happening. And then helps you ask for investments where needed. Now, we have Christina and Kelsey here today because they're on the client side of things. They know the struggle you guys are facing and asking for money. So we're gonna be talking at the very end, especially about how to answer some FAQs, like, I don't have the money for this. We're gonna help you kind of think through that. So how do you measure marketing effectiveness? It's a great question. Like, we've been asking ourselves this for years. We've been trying to answer it for Mighty Citizen, but also for our clients. They come in and they spend money with us, and we have some of the data that we can share from the results of them. But how do we holistically know whether they're moving further along in terms of their marketing maturity. So we want to help you guys show progress to your leadership. So show how you've been on that spectrum and now where you are. So like measuring your effectiveness. So you with data, so you can go to your leadership and say, we need an investment for this, and here's why, and here's where we've come. So here's how far we've gone. So basically, we set out to answer this question, figured out that there wasn't anything on, kind of in existence that made this easy. So Mighty Citizen launched something called the Mighty GPS in February, and it is a self-assessment to measure your marketing maturity. It's absolutely free. Takes less than 10 minutes. In fact, data showing it takes about 6 minutes. So, it's pretty quick. It is a bunch of questions. There are lots of categories, which we'll get into. And I want to note that we're not talking about organizational maturity when we talk about this assessment. You can have a mature organization and still not be effective in terms of your marketing. And the opposite is also true. You can be a young and scrappy org that's really effective. We're going to look at an example of that today with Atlas. So just know that going in. And just a brief background on how we built this tool. So we've been talking about maturity model for years. Y'all know how it goes. You've got your ideas for this big creative project you want to build, and it's hard to like get it done and work on your own projects. But we did pull in Mighty Citizens from each of our departments and had them weigh in on the most relevant questions to their discipline. So like the design team weighed in and the UX team weighed in. We started with a simple prototype last summer and did some user testing with our clients and our friends, kind of make sure that like what we had set up was actually helping them and also functioning properly. So based on that feedback, we made a revision to some of our questions, we revised our scoring, and we beta launched with a small audience in November. And that included Christina and her team at Atlas. So they were they took their first GPS in November of last year. Then we launched it publicly in February. And if you do end up taking it and you have feedback for us, we would highly love to have that feedback. We're constantly trying, y'all know you can't set it and forget it. We're constantly trying to improve upon it. So I encourage any feedback if you do take it. The Mighty GPS measures 6 marketing categories across 4 marketing stages. We're going to go into each of these a little bit, but for now, it's important to note the categories are broad enough to cover most aspects of marketing. So it is a holistic, it's not just a digital marketing maturity model, it's really a holistic maturity model. There's about 6 to 8 questions in each of the categories. And we establish scores for each of these categories and then give you an overall marketing maturity score. And your score determines your stage. You can see the maturity stages there. So we have 4 stages. We'll go into each of these in a moment. When you take the Mighty GPS, we highly recommend you take it with your team. It was created with the heads of marketing and communications in mind because it is a marketing model, and they tend to be the ones that know the most about like what all is happening at your organization. However, we do suggest the full team take it, and the reason for that is because you're going to be able to see whether your team's in alignment. So if your head of marketing takes it, and then also your marketing manager takes it and your marketing coordinator takes it. If you all take it, you can compare your results and see if everybody roughly came up with the same results. It just shows how in alignment you are. And if you're not in alignment, where are you off and how can you educate the team or like come to some agreement about what's truly happening among your marketing department. You may also want other teams to take it. So if you're at a larger organization, you're on the marketing side and you have an events team, it might be great for your events team to take it as well, or fundraising or student recruitment. There's all kinds of other departments that it might make sense to weigh in on a marketing marketing maturity tool. And it will, sorry, I've been skipping ahead here. It will give you a well-rounded view of your effectiveness. So again, the more people that weigh in, the more you can see that. And it can be great for getting new hires onboarded. So, sharing the results with them and having them see kind of where we are today on their, right when they've started can be helpful. Hey, Christina, I know you were the one that first filled it out in November. How have you used it with your team? Have multiple people taken it? And how did you see alignment or not?
Yeah, in the beginning, I was part of the beta crew, and at the time, we really didn't have a person carved out doing marketing work specifically. And so I took it myself because I had a broad enough view of the organization. We're a fairly small staff, and our roles were transitioning and changing. And so Kelsey didn't have this title back then, and she was taking point on other projects of the organization. So I took it myself, knowing what I know about the organization. And then once that was done, I shared it with the team as a whole because we were all dipping our fingers into various pots when it came to marketing. And so I think that it gave us a really good sense of, that it was pretty decentralized and we could use some help.
Great. So, we mentioned that this is a self-assessment, it's a survey. It walked you through these 6 marketing categories. I'm gonna take a look at each one high level, just so you know like what we're measuring and what you want to be looking at in terms of, the categories or like the disciplines when you're thinking about your marketing effectiveness. So the first one is research and analytics. Some of the questions we ask are, do you understand your audiences? Are you using analytics to further your insight? This section is really around both understanding audiences so that you can speak to them better and in their words and languages that they use, and also analytics. So are you using your analytics in order to further your strategy? Branding and strategy, examples of questions include, do you have guidelines in place for consistent messaging and branding? And do you have written plans for how you'll communicate with your audiences? So the branding and strategy section is really around cohesiveness, consistency, whether you have underlying look and feel and messaging that everyone's using. Marketing and SEO is the third category, and this has questions like, have you established key goals and shared those with leadership? And then do you use search engine optimization or SEO to drive traffic to your website? So this is really around like setting up goals. A lot of times when we work with organizations, they kind of know generally what they want to do, but they don't have established metrics. And so this is asking questions around KPIs and things like that. UX design and content, ask questions like, do you plan your content to meet audience needs? Does your website support your strategic goals? This is really around the content that you're producing and your website specifically. A lot of times here at Mighty Citizen, we say, as an association or a nonprofit or government, really your job is to create content that moves people to do something. I mean, that's marketing essentially as a whole. And so, are you doing that? Technology, is your website easy to update and maintain? Do your different platforms integrate seamlessly? So many of us have, we have membership management systems or donor management systems or student management systems, and those don't always play nicely with our general websites. And so, questions around the technology specifically and how easy it is to use both for internal and external audiences. And then the last one is team dynamics. Does your internal team represent a variety of skills? Does leadership believe in the power of marketing? This was the last category we added. And the reason we added it is we just seen so many times that you can have a lot of the other things in place, but if you don't have support from leadership or an adequate budget or, a variety of skills on your team, it's a bottleneck. And so this last one is really important for that reason. Kelsey, I'm curious for you, looking at these 6 categories, when you first, a year ago, roughly, when you first filled out the GPS, do you think you would have had a good idea of like which categories were strong and which were not as strong?
Yeah, I think when Christina brought the results to me, I don't think I was very surprised with what we saw. So,
Yeah.
you're going to share our results too.
Yeah, that often happens. I mean, we're going to talk about this sort of in this next section, but generally people have a good sense of roughly where their organization would sit on a scale of 0 to 100 in terms of marketing maturity, but they may not know what to do from there. And so that's part of the next step, right? So you fill out the self-assessment, you're going to get a marketing maturity score. And those scores are basically those 6 categories averaged out to give you a total score. The scores then place you in a stage, and you can see the scoring breakdown here. So crawling makes up the lowest 40%, 39%. And then each subsequent stage, walking, running, and soaring, make up about a 20 point range. Of course, these are across all 6 categories. And before we walk through each stage, I want to do another poll. Y'all might have seen this pop up earlier, but if you answered it before, oh, here we go. So which stage of marketing maturity do you think you're in? As I said, most of us sort of have a sense of this even before taking the GPS. So I'll be curious to see here. Okay, you guys, they're coming in. I'm going to let it keep running here. What we're seeing is most of you are saying walking. And I'm also going to share in a minute some of the data we've seen so far since February of where people actually are sitting. Let me end this poll and then share the results. And so you can see 57% of you believe you're in walking, 27% believe you're in crawling, 16% running, and nobody's high on themselves right now. So 0 for soaring. So let's see. I'll walk you through these and let's see, if they hold up. Okay, sorry, I went ahead and ran through that. Okay, so our 4 marketing maturity stages, I'm going to walk through each one of these in a little bit of detail. I will have to say there are generalizations here. So for your stage, some of the challenges and next steps will be applicable to your organization and some won't. Every organization is a different point along that marketing maturity journey. And so we can't account for everyone's unique opportunities and qualities. Instead, we've created the stages to best fit what we've seen in many or most organizations within a stage. We've been working with mission-driven organizations for 20+ years. And so we sort of know, where people, what their commonalities are across each of the stages. So crawling is the first one up. Crawling is all about focusing on the fundamentals. Common challenges when you're crawling are things like a limited budget, limited buy-in. What I mean by that is you have some support potentially from leadership, but not like they don't, they might struggle with really understanding the potential of marketing and communications. Oftentimes you lack resources. That can be time, that can be money, that can be technology, can be any number of things. There are no concrete goals. Again, you might have kind of a general thinking about what you need to be doing or what you want to be doing, but you haven't really got concrete on what your metrics look like and what your analytics look like. And then they're often reactive versus proactive. Next steps for crawling typically include surveying your audiences, establishing your guidelines, creating a plan and a budget, and setting measurable goals. Again, you see it's really about fundamentals here. Now, if you end up in crawling, do not despair. In some ways, crawling can actually be the best category. And the reason I say that is because there's a ton of opportunity to make really huge, impactful changes. And you can choose which direction you move in first. So I know it can feel overwhelming to be in crawling, but again, it's a journey. It's made one step at a time. Don't be too hard on yourself for sure. And in fact, if you're in crawling, you're probably doing a lot of things in crawling. Walking is all about establishing full competence. So the bones are there. You've got those fundamentals in place, but you want to know that the work that you're putting in is paying off. And so it means you have a strong foundation on which to build exceptional new results. Common challenges include a lack of urgency. What you're doing is kind of working. So there's a lack of challenge or urgency to make changes. Decisions are often driven by gut. We'll talk more about the results in the research category, but a lot of times we're going off of what we feel to be true and not what we know to be true. Old or clunky technologies are often a challenge here. Your UX or your user experience is passable, but not great. And you're still often reactive versus proactive. Next steps often include optimizing those Google Analytics that can tell you a lot, getting everything in place there, honing your messaging, prioritizing your user experience, and implementing new technology. Now, you guys might be thinking at this point, Rachel, I thought we were in walking. 57% of you said you thought you were in walking, but I'm not sure that's true because we have our Google Analytics up and firing and it's working great. Now, that might be true and you still might be in walking. So again, not everything's going to apply 100% to everybody, but this is generally what walking looks like. By the way, if you are a marketing team of 1 and you are in marketing, I mean, you're doing such a good job. It was really hard to be a marketing team of one and to be in walking and doing enough to be beyond the basics, like kudos. Kelsey, little spoiler alert, this is where you guys found yourselves in November 21. Your score was a 43. So again, just on this side of walking.
Made the cut.
You made the cut. Does this feel like where you would have said you were in November?
Yeah, it really does. I see this list, and again, I saw it when Christina gave me the report, and no surprises there.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine a lot of you were like, yeah, I said walking, and yeah, that feels right.
Mm-hmm.
Running is about optimizing infrastructure or making the most of what's working for you. So where do opportunities exist in the places that are working to go deeper, to increase your efficiency, and to optimize what's already in place? Common challenges include your knowledge has hit its limits, and that's internal knowledge primarily. It's really hard as a marketer to keep up with all of the changes, and it just sometimes you just kind of hit that wall where you're like, I cannot learn one more thing. So that can get in your way. There's no real impetus to change, kind of like walking. If you're running, things are going pretty good. It's hard to say we need to really change something. Research efforts are light, so you may be doing some research, but they are not necessarily deep research techniques. Your tech has unused features, so maybe you have good tech, but you're using like 2% of it, and you could be using more, but just haven't invested that time. Or a lot of times your strategies are built on thinking that is 2 or 3 years old. So we're just not always keeping up with the research in a way that we need to be. Next steps include diving deeper into research, auditing your content and your user experience. A lot of times when you're in running, you are pumping out content. You've got a good machine going. We're not always stopping to go, is this content furthering our mission? So, you might need to back up and audit and kind of rethink that. Testing, more testing. Again, it's about optimizing, and testing is a huge part of that. And then data security, privacy practices, those things are really knocking on our doors, and we're having to turn our attention there. And so for a lot of running organizations, that's where they're starting to turn their attention. And then lastly, soaring. Let's see, maybe some of you will think, oh, soaring at this, but soaring is about experimenting and influencing. You'll be scouring your organization for opportunities to reach new levels of success, and hopefully sharing what you've learned with your peers inside and outside your organization. So common challenges look like, you have big ideas, but they often demand big money. So like getting that money to do those things. Content governance. Content governance is basically when you're producing a lot of content, having rules around how it's produced, edited, approved, archived, maintained. It's really important for big organizations. So content governance is often a challenge. It's hard to share your project nuances with leadership at this level. What they care about, what you care about are not always the same. So getting on the same page there. And then scalability. If your department is firing really well, how do you scale that and help other departments as well? Next steps include testing, implementing content governance, iterating on new technologies. So kind of like that iteration cycle in a repetitive way. Coaching your team. So again, you have things to teach others, and then seeking new ideas. This is often like you're doing what you're doing really well. And so sometimes, you're in it, you're at that 3,000 foot level and you need that 30,000 foot level. So seeking new ideas from partners or, professional development or whatever is really important at this stage. So I want to share some of our initial data. So we've had this out since February. We have had 350 organizations take the Mighty GPS. And so far, we've seen that the majority of scores are between 35 and 79. So they're somewhere between really high crawling and really high running. And so that puts most of them, honestly, the majority of them are in walking and running. So we saw some of you guys, I think the majority said walking and crawling, but maybe that's changed now that you know a little bit more. Marketing budget, people that are spending over $50,000 see increased marketing effectiveness. In fact, your scores will increase, or our data shows that when you spend at least $50,000 per year on your marketing, your scores are 5 to 10 points higher in each of the categories. It's across the board. We're also seeing that research and analytics is by far the lowest scoring category. I'll share this with you in a moment, with an average in the crawling stage. This is the place where everybody struggles. It's in that research and analytics area. And the team dynamics typically ranks the highest, followed by branding and strategy. I love this. It means we have faith in our teams and our leadership. So that's always a good sign. One thing I'll note too, just on their research, is that orgs spending between $50,000 and $100,000 a year are tending to do best. That means they're doing better than people that aren't spending $50,000. It also means, in terms of the scales and the scores, they're also doing better than the people spending more than $100,000. I think what the reason for that is they have enough money and resources to be resourceful, but they also have to be efficient with it. So it's not like bukus of money to just throw around. So they've got to be pretty efficient with the budget that they're spending. This doesn't mean if you're spending over $100,000 a year that you aren't effective. It just means that you may need to be mindful about what is and isn't working, so that, because there's likely some efficiencies in there you could capture. Here's some average scores so far. Again, this is across all the mission-driven industries, so nonprofit associations, government, and higher ed. But you'll see here the lowest score is the research and analytics at 39%. Branding and strategies coming in at 64, second highest category. Marketing and SEO at 57, UX design and content at 59, technology at 60, and team at 69. So you'll see that it's really the research and analytics that are bringing most of us down. That's not always the case, but more often than not. Okay, so you've taken the Mighty GPS. Here's what you're going to get. You're going to get an immediate score and a stage. I'm going to use Atlas as our example throughout this whole thing. So you're looking at, this is their November 2021 score. So again, I mentioned they had 43%. They were in walking. You're also going to get a score for each category, so you can see at a glance where your strengths and areas of opportunity lie. What's interesting about Atlas's initial results is they were all pretty even. You know, they were kind of across the board. We're going to talk more about that. But they did buck the trend of having their lowest score be research and analytics. And I do find this with associations. Generally, we do see that their research and analytics scores do tend to be a little bit higher. You're also going to get a list of tactical next steps for each of your categories. So again, they scored at 40% in branding and strategy. You'll see that they got a list of 5 to 6 next steps. Kelsey, I'm curious for you, when you got the general report, you know, you said there were no surprises. Were you kind of like overwhelmed? I'm curious if you were overwhelmed, because you do get each category and you get 5 or 6 next steps for each category.
Right. Yeah, it is overwhelming. There was a lot to kind of take in. And as Christina mentioned, at the time, I did not have this title, but she shared the report with me, and I think it was maybe the launch pad of evolving into my current title. But what I really loved and appreciated about the report was that it did link for all the next steps. It linked to all of these toolkits and other resources. So I wasn't staring at a blank slate when it came to getting started. And, you know, we had to, as a team, work together and figure out where to prioritize, because you look at a report with relatively low to mediocre scores across the board and you want to fix it all, but the reality is you can't do everything, at least not all at once. So
yeah. And I'll just jump in to say, because I'm seeing some concern popping in the chat. Y'all, we're tiny. Like we're growing really fast, and we're a young organization growing super fast, but we're a 1.5 million organization. We had 6 FTEs. We're down to 5 because 1 retired, and we knew that was coming. And it was part of the change we did. So I see anxiety in here, and trust me, because, you know, Mighty Citizen is an organization that has a phenomenal reputation for working with larger organizations. So part of my concern in taking the GPS report, the assessment tool in the first place, is I'm so tiny. You know, if they're going to tell me I just need to throw a bunch of money at this, it's a waste of my time. But I think if you hang with us in the next couple slides, you'll see that even a small organization that can't afford consultants and can't afford a massive investment can still make a difference. So hang with us for just a little bit.
Yeah, I was seeing that same concern. Someone asked too, you know, what is the average operating budget of those who have completed the assessment? I don't have those numbers at my fingertips, but I would say about half of those that have completed it, so half of the 350 had a marketing budget of under 25. So this data is well represented for small organizations. There are some that are over 500,000. So it does span all different sizes. It's really not built for any one size. I think what the data has shown us is that the more you have the opportunity to spend, the more likely your effectiveness is higher by that 5 or 10 points, but it's only 5 or 10 points. I mean, that's the thing. It's not drastic. It's not like it's all about the money. So for those who may be concerned. What you can use your report to do is to spark conversations among your team. How, what does this look like? Do we agree? What are we going to do about it? You can build your case internally. We're going to talk more about that. Prioritize kind of tells you like, where do you maybe need to work on some things to get them to a certain point. It may also tell you, this thing isn't really working. This category isn't really very good for us. And actually that's by design. Mighty Citizens specifically, we were doing a bunch with SEO. We felt like we were seeing some results, but we were spending so much time on it. It was just getting in the way and we dropped it. So I'll be taking this Mighty GPS myself at the end of the year to see if it hurt us or not, and looking at all of our analytics to see if it hurt us. It's definitely been a benefit to not have to put time into it. You can check back on that report. We're going to talk more about this, a year later and see how things have changed. And of course, we're going to give you some expert advice and free resources there too, based on your results. Those free resources are result specific. So we're going to talk about how Atlas went and made some efforts in their branding category. And so like this is an example of, centralizing your brand with the brand guidelines doc. If your brand guidelines need help, here's how to do it. We're going to tell you. Our MO is to let you guys do it yourself. If you need help, maybe you'll reach out. But really the idea is that you can take this and never need us. Atlas is not a client of ours. So. Okay, putting your report into action. Really quickly, you're going to get the report, showing you some snaps of that. We're going to talk more about that. We do have a Mighty GPS Get Started planner. So when you get your report, we're also going to link you to this planner. It can be overwhelming, as Kelsey said. So this planner just walks you through how to pick where to start and then what to do for each of those. Okay, so a reminder, this is the scores for Atlas in November. I mentioned that your scores were all relatively even. I'm curious, Christina, how did you decide where to start?
I don't know if I really decided where to start, but I think, ultimately what we had to do because we're small is that we sort of cherry picked. So it's not like we made a decision to say, let's dive into research and analytics. Instead, what we had the opportunity to do is that with the next steps that you get when you take this free assessment, it says, you might want to think about these things. And so we sort of cherry picked a little bit from each category. And if there had been one of these scores that was significantly underwater, I think I would have made a more concerted effort and said, y'all, we are falling behind. We really need to focus on this. But I think that I could see that we were consistent and low in each category, and which is partially why when we threw all the puzzle pieces up in the air and reorganized our staff, Kelsey, like 6 months ago or whatever, I don't even know what month it is anymore, y'all. I'm gonna work on this latte and I'll let you know when I'm done. And so the point being that we were able to kind of reorganize our organization. So if I'm honest, when I look at the output, I knew that we needed more focus on marketing in a holistic sense, right, as a whole. And so Kelsey had interest in this space and some talent, and so I said, let's shift then. Let's reorganize. I'm not going to say that we reorganized our entire association based on this report, but it was one of many contributing factors that helped me understand that, kind of where we were in the maturation of our efforts.
Great. And I think can you talk about, you were telling me that branding was really important. And so, while you knew you kind of had to go across the board, that you did put a particular area of focus on branding.
Yeah, so Atlas is a young organization, as I mentioned. We technology leaders and tech professionals, CIOs, have been in the independent school space for a really long time, but they would sort of meet up at other organizations. They would get together at another association's event and kind of like meet up someplace. And so when our founders put our organization together, it was just as I mentioned, a handful of years ago. We're only about 7 years old, and so with that there was a whole bunch of wait, what's Atlas? So there was a big branding effort, not only in terms of our prospects, people who would be likely to, schools joining our organization, but also among all the other regional and state and kind of, I would say, adjacent associations that operate in the independent K-12 space. So what we really needed to focus in on was making sure that we were speaking a very similar branding voice through all of our vehicles. And part of why we wanted to do this is because I believe that it would make us look bigger. it would professionalize us. And so
Until you
we
make it.
looked. Yeah, exactly. And so what this allowed us to do was really hone in on certain things that were going to be high touch branding efforts, because even thinking about branding as a small organization can be super overwhelming. So we tried to target in on things that would make a really big impact. And one example that I can share is that, we may not have had the money and the time to hire a consultant to come in and help us with membership personas and a very firm breakdown. But even if you don't have a super specific outline of membership personas or potential members that would come into your space, you can kind of wing it, right? Like we all kind of know, like I could probably take mine and apply them to yours, right? Like we've got early career professionals, kind of mid-career, core career professionals. We have like our superstars, our super volunteers who've been around forever. And we needed to make sure that we were kind of touching all of those kind of categories within our space. And so without a big fancy consultant, we were able to kind of hone in and at least start somewhere. So it may not be perfect, but we for sure didn't want to like trip over dollars to pick up dimes, right? Like we weren't going to sacrifice the good in the pursuit of perfection. So we went good enough, and I think that you can kind of see where that landed us.
Yeah, yeah. So also around the UX design and content, Kelsey, can you speak to, this was another area where y'all said, oh, and the score was actually okay. It was 53. I mean, it was one of your higher ones. Why did you put emphasis here as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, it was one of our higher scores, but I think we just kind of really honed in on especially the staff communication. As Christina mentioned, about 6 months ago, we just kind of threw everything up on the walls and really reorganized our staff and priorities. And we have one person who's taking lead on content in terms of creation and seeking out what our members need. Um, but I work now very closely with her, and we really try to ensure a consistent message across across all of the content we're putting out. And all of the events we do. We did like a focus group with some members who, maybe weren't those super volunteers, but just we noticed that they were participating in several of our webinars and, asked how do they want to experience their content. So I think we've developed more content. It all has a similar look and feel. And then in the development of the content, I'm already focusing on how I'm going to talk about it and how we're going to market it. And we take a jobs to be done type of approach. So, when we create the content, we're already looking at what is this helping our members solve? What job is this doing for our members? And it might be doing something different. One piece of content might be serving a different purpose for several different members, but we really kind of categorize that, and that's how we talk about it, and that's how we bring it to our members. So I think we've seen an increase in kind of engagement in our everything we put out there, in our programming, in our content. in our discussions from our membership since we've started taking a more streamlined and cohesive approach in this area.
I think that's a good point too for smaller orgs. You know, a lot of times we want to go with the things that are of the moment, the digital ads and the, you know, the glam and glitz of the tech. Truly, if you are a small org and you're wondering where to put your resources, look at your messaging and see if you are saying the same things all the time. You may be getting bored with your message. We tell people this all the time, like, I know you're sick of saying the same thing for 3 years. They're just figuring out, your audience is just figuring out you're saying anything. And they're finally starting to hear you. It takes them way longer, and you want to tend to change it before they've actually even heard it. So I would say if you're a small org that doesn't have a lot of funding or doesn't have a lot of money, like, look at that messaging and make sure that that's set and it's consistent. Okay, so what's next? You have taken the GPS, you got your report, you put some next steps into action. A year's gone by. You know, what does that look like now? You want to benchmark yourself. So we recommend that you take the GPS every 6 to 12 months. The frequency of that kind of depends on how much you've actually done to further that. So if you've taken some next steps, and like Atlas, for example, has done a ton of stuff in the 10 months between their last GPS and the most recent one, which I'll share in a moment. But you may want to do it every year, or if you're like them, maybe they want to do it every 6 months. Hang on to your reports and use them to benchmark yourself later. So we're really hoping that this is a benchmarking tool so that you can show progress in a way that you haven't really been able to do before. So for an example, Atlas went from a 43% walking to a 67% running. That is a 24% increase over 10 months. I mean, they have really, and a lot of that is because Kelsey is now in a marketing position where no one was before. But that's a huge jump, and that's why we asked them to join us, because they're just a star model of what can actually happen with a lot of effort. I won't say, you know, with a little effort, a lot of effort. But yeah. This is their categories. If you're curious how their November data looked against their September data, you'll see that all of these areas shot up. And this is their the last category, so UX, technology, and team dynamics. Team dynamics went way up, I think, because y'all had more focus on marketing because you had someone dedicated to it. But your score can also go down, like in tech. And I think when we talked about this, y'all were like, well, we just didn't emphasize that. And so now it's been another 10 months. And it probably feels like you're stuck in the same place. Yeah. We do have future plans for the Mighty GPS. So ideally, we'll be able to benchmark across industries. So I've seen a lot of chatter about this in the chat, this idea of comparing yourself against like-size organizations. So we do ask when you fill it out what your industry is, what your budget, like what your how much you're spending for your marketing spend each year, and what your revenue is, if it's applicable. For higher ed and government, that's not as applicable. But eventually, hopefully in 2023, you will be able to actually put in those things and see how you're comparing to others that fit those same selections. We will also be reporting on what we see across the industries. So once we have enough data from each of the industries, we're going to put out a nonprofit marketing effectiveness study that'll say, here's what we're seeing across nonprofits. And then you can see if those are your same challenges as well. Ideally, all of those coming next year once we have enough data. And you can help in that by taking the Mighty GPS, by the way. So action items: measure your marketing effectiveness by taking the GPS, review that custom report, including your overall score and each category score. Decide based on those scores and your strategic goals for your organization, what you're going to focus on first. Use those resources provided to you. You do not need us to go from 43% to 67. You do not need us to grow that 24%. So you can do it on your own if you need to, and then track your progress by taking that assessment again. I want to jump in before we get to questions that you guys have. I want to tackle a few questions that we always see. Maybe they're already in there around this topic and you know, the challenges that we all have. So what if I don't have a large budget to implement changes? What if I don't have $50,000+ to spend a year? I will just say that most of these recommendations some of them don't require budget, but they do require time. So for example, we talked about messaging being really important. You as a marketer can develop your messaging. It's hard to do because you're in it, but if you can really, ask around, test it a little, you can do your own messaging, and that does not cost dollars. It does take time. So. Okay, so what if I don't have any time? That's the follow-up question, right? So I'll tell you the same thing I tell everybody. You're going to have to prioritize. Your messaging to leadership might be, we're doing okay. We could be doing better if I unprioritize X and instead did Y, or if I put more effort into X or Y, right? Christina, you, I know, have really have some ideas around how y'all, I would love to hear how y'all do this, because a 5 or 6 person org to go 24 points, like what did you do? How'd you do that?
Yeah, I think high level, there's a couple things here. So those of you who know me and have heard me speak before on various topics, I am a stickler for tying everything to a strategic plan or your strategic deliverables. So whether you are in an executive director position trying to have a conversation with your board, or whether you're in Kelsey's position, on a marketing team, maybe not even on a marketing team, but trying to have a conversation with the marketing team. In an association, I have just found, and I've built my career in it, I feel like if you can have a conversation around strategic deliverables, then it's hard for people to argue about that, right? Like, yes, I realize there's always things we need to put on the stop doing list, but part of what we did to be successful in this space was we tied all of our efforts into our strategic plan. And if we're marketing something or spending time, maybe wasting time on a marketing effort that really wasn't connecting to the goals we promised our board we would meet, then we were just backpedaling and having the bravery to backpedal out of those efforts and redirect. And so I think that it can really help, this type of an assessment and a benchmark gives you a place to focus. It also gave me a starting point for a conversation with my board. We recognized we needed to make some pretty significant technological investments to be able to do some of the bells and whistles, but we are small. So I took it to my board and framed it up like there you go. That's jumping ahead as always. That we were able to kind of say to them, if we invest in these areas, we think we will see these outcomes. And as it turns out, we did indeed see those outcomes. So, and as we've jumped around, I'll just say one last thing about just this topic in general. I know lately marketers have a focus on digital and technology. And that's great. We do too. But I will also say that we are a technology organization representing tech specialists. And we have found that sometimes going back to basics actually has been the most successful thing. So where you could assume that we invested in tech or we set up more campaigns on an auto send, functionality. I mean, we did some of that, but I think a huge difference in our scores in this assessment is because we rebranded and relaunched our magazine during the pandemic. And we won 2 national awards for it from ASAE, and we have an Excel award too for our publication. So a huge reason might surprise you. Our numbers went from here to here, not because we sent more emails. It's because we became much more strategic in how we view our entire set of marketing vehicles, and we received some national recognition for having done so. So just keep your mind open to what actually is marketing, because I would argue even the invoice you send is marketing.
I love that. Yeah, brand is not your logo, right? It's everything. I'm going to skip this last question because I want to get to y'all's questions. So real quick, thank you. Thank you to Kelsey and to Christina as well. Loved having your viewpoint on this. We have a URL, mightycitizen.com/maturity. You're going to get these slides there. We're also going to send them tomorrow via email. We have a white paper on marketing maturity. We have the planner, and we have the assessment as well. That's your one-stop shop for this topic. And then again, the Mighty GPS is at themightygps.com. I also want to mention this is part of a 3-part series. So if you registered for today, which you all did, you are also registered for the next 2 in the series, and the next one's October 6th. These are all in preparation for getting you ready for 2023. And that topic is 5 digital strategies to help you reimagine your marketing. All right, I want to turn it over for questions. And Bree is going to help me with that. So Bree, I'm going to let you pop in here.
Hello. Yeah, I think we have right now, I have two questions that weren't, I know there were some during the chat that y'all already answered. So I'll just get to these two for now. The first one is for Rachel. On the analytics side, we're beating a lot of industry benchmarks, but it's hard for non-marketing leaders to understand modern metrics, especially in behavioral marketing tech. Any insight on how to message analytics to non-marketers so they know they cannot expect very high numbers and percentages?
Yeah, this is a hard one. The way that I have seen success here is to find benchmarks. So we don't have our benchmarks ready yet. But for example, I don't know where this person came from in terms of industry, but if you're a nonprofit and you're asking that question, there's some benchmarking available for nonprofits. M+R does one called, they're called the benchmarks, M+R benchmarks. And they have benchmarks around, like, especially around digital analytics, where, you know, your open rates are one thing. They might look like a pretty decent number, but like your CTRs are tiny. They're like 2%, and that's pretty good. So I think if you can find industry benchmarks, of course, associations are a great place to go looking for those benchmarks. So if you can find benchmarks, then you can show that your numbers are there or above that. That's going to help set their expectations around what kind of numbers they should actually be seeing.
Great. All right. And the next one is, how do you move out of the silo of internal, quote, urgent needs to be more strategic?
Oh, I'm going to let Christina.
Kelsey and I can talk about this.
Yeah.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think so much of that, guys, has to do with culture. And I've worked at great collaborative associations, and I've worked at incredibly frustrating siloed organizations. In Atlas, we were working in a fairly collaborative way, but we each were kind of like targeting what needed to be done. What I can say is that what really changed for us is that we embraced a project management system. We are decentralized. We have a headquarters. I'm at it, but we don't all work here. And so we had to all buy into a project management software. And that is the thing that sealed it for us, because now Kelsey comes up with incredible marketing plans, intricate marketing plans, and I know exactly what piece she needs my review on. I can take a look at it. Even if I'm traveling as the CEO, I can take a look and know exactly what's going out tomorrow. And so it's really great that we're all using a centralized system. Now, I recognize that may feel like kumbaya for a lot of you. That might not be within your measure of control, but stop and think about what you could use. Zachary, I can see that you're asking, which we happen to use Asana, but there are many out there that folks love and use and swear by. We just happen to be Asana people. And it has been a game changer for us, not just with marketing, but really with the efficiency of our entire organization. So I don't really have any words. I think the problem with the silo question is that there really is no silver bullet, unfortunately. I think that it's if you don't have a high level of control in your organization, the best you can do is focus on what you can control. Kelsey, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to say, from like a user perspective, I've used a few different project management tools, and like Christina said, they all function pretty similarly. But what I've been able to do is I've actually taken a lot of the templates from Mighty Citizen, the communications plans, and I sit there and I kind of like fill it in. Literally, I'll print it and like fill it in with pen and paper. And then I go into Asana and I create pretty elaborate projects, and I'm just kind of tasking people to it. And you really do, you have to have the buy-in from every member of the staff. And that was the key. Once we all decided together, we're going to do this, the time, that question, what if I don't have any time? We now really, I feel like we do have more time and we're getting a lot more done, and our communication is way more streamlined. So I highly, highly recommend that. And these tools that you're getting from Mighty Citizen can still work. You just have to make them work with your system that you're using.
I would add two things to that question of how you focus on strategy and not tactics. One, schedule time, strategy, and don't let anything get in the way. Easy to say, but like, put those blocks. I still do it. I think I live and die by that. Two, if you're building a strategic plan with your leadership, or you have a strategic plan that you're executing on, and you agree that this is what we're going to do this year. And by the way, the third session of the series is how to plan your communications plan for 2023. So you're going to build out that plan. You're going to get approval on it. When somebody comes to you and says, hey, we got to do this thing, and you're like, okay, well, that wasn't in the plan, but that things happen. What are we not going to do in the plan to make that happen? So there's always trade-offs. You cannot do it all unless you're giving me more time or money or people. So I think that question is really important. All right, Christina had to pop out maybe for a meeting. I want to say thank you to everybody. Really appreciate it. We're here, send us a note and let us know if you have any follow-up questions, or send us feedback. Happy for that too. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much for having us on.
Of course.